Ladies and gentlemen, let us consider a curious image of man standing alone, fists clenched, ready for battle. Against what, we might ask? The world? Himself? Or perhaps something far more elusive, an imagined foe conjured from the depths of his own mind? This man believes he must fight, for he has been taught that struggle is noble and solitude is strength. But have you ever stopped to wonder, is there such a thing as fighting alone? Think of it. Even the solitary warrior draws his strength from something beyond himself, a cause, a grievance, or a vision of victory. The waves crashing on the shore are not isolated events, they are part of the great rhythm of the tides, pulled by the moon, shaped by the winds. And so it is with this man. His solitude is an illusion, for he is entangled in the very fabric of existence. The man who fights alone often carries with him the belief that his journey is solitary, that his struggles are uniquely his, and that no one else could possibly understand the burdens he bears. This sense of isolation, however, is not a reality, it is an illusion born from the perception of separateness. It arises from the idea that the self is an island, distinct and apart from the vast sea of existence. But when we examine this notion more closely, we see that it cannot hold. The truth is far richer, far more intricate, and infinitely more connected. At the heart of this illusion is the notion of individualism, the idea that we are entirely self-contained, self-sufficient entities. This belief has been reinforced by cultural narratives that celebrate the lone hero, the self-made person, and the solitary genius. These stories encourage us to see ourselves as distinct from the world around us, as though our thoughts, feelings, and struggles exist in a vacuum. But if we pause and reflect, we begin to see the interconnected threads that weave through every aspect of our lives. Consider the air we breathe. It flows freely across the planet, connecting us in an unbroken exchange with all living beings. The oxygen in our lungs may have been produced by a tree halfway across the world, just as the breath we exhale becomes part of someone else's life-giving inhale. Even in this simple, involuntary act of breathing, we are deeply enmeshed in a web of life that defies isolation. The same is true for our thoughts and experiences. No emotion, no idea, no struggle arises in isolation. Every challenge we face is shaped by our relationships, our environments, and the countless unseen influences of culture, history, and biology. The pain of the man who fights alone may feel unique to him, but it is, in reality, a reflection of shared human experience. We are all shaped by the same forces: loss, hope, fear, love. These experiences bind us together even when we are unaware of it. To see through the illusion of solitude, we must also consider the profound interdependence of all things. The food we eat is grown by others, often in lands far from our own. The clothes we wear are made by hands we will never meet. Even the knowledge we possess is not solely our own, it is the culmination of countless generations of discovery, trial, and error. Each aspect of our lives is a testament to the countless lives that intersect with our own, often invisibly, yet undeniably. And yet, despite this inherent connectedness, the man who fights alone feels apart. Why? Perhaps because the illusion of solitude offers a sense of control. To believe one is alone is to believe that the fight is purely one's own, that the victories are singular, and the failures, too, rest solely on one's shoulders. This belief can be both empowering and burdensome. It creates a narrative of self-reliance, but at the cost of denying the richness of shared experience. The illusion of solitude often arises from the fear of vulnerability. To acknowledge our connection to others is to admit that we are not wholly self-sufficient, that we need others, and that others need us. It is to accept that our struggles are not entirely unique, that others have faced and overcome similar challenges, and that we might benefit from their wisdom and support. Yet this acknowledgement requires humility, a willingness to see oneself as part of a larger whole, rather than as an isolated figure. When we begin to let go of this illusion, a profound shift occurs. we start to see the world not as a series of disconnected individuals, but as an intricate, interdependent system. The man who fights alone is not alone at all. His strength is bolstered by those who came before him, by the knowledge and tools they left behind, by the relationships that sustain him, even if he does not recognize them. His very existence is supported by countless unseen forces that make his fight possible. This realization does not diminish the importance of individual effort or personal responsibility. Rather, it enhances it, for it shows us that our actions resonate far beyond ourselves. Every choice we make, every battle we fight, has ripples that extend outward, touching lives we may never know. To see through the illusion of solitude is to embrace this interconnectedness, to recognize that we are not solitary actors on a barren stage, but participants in a vast and dynamic play of life. The man who fights alone may feel alone, but he is not. His struggles, his victories, his very existence are bound up with the lives of others. To see this truth is to dissolve the illusion and step into a world of connection, where even the most solitary fight is supported by the unseen threads of the universe. The man who fights alone often directs his energy toward foes that seem tangible and immediate, yet upon closer inspection, these adversaries reveal themselves to be mere phantoms of his own creation. These imaginary foes are born not of external threats, but from the depths of the mind shaped by fear, insecurity, and misunderstanding. They exist not in the world as it is, but in the man's perception of it, fueled by his inner conflicts and the narratives he has chosen to believe. At the root of this phenomenon lies the human mind's remarkable ability to construct meaning. The mind, ever active, seeks to organize the chaos of life into patterns, stories, and causes. This ability is a gift, allowing us to understand, predict, and navigate the world. Yet, when misdirected, it can also turn neutral or even benign circumstances into sources of threat. The man who fights alone often falls prey to this tendency, perceiving enemies where none exist or magnifying minor challenges into insurmountable obstacles. Imagine, for instance, a man walking through a dark forest. The rustling of leaves becomes the imagined approach of a predator. The shadows cast by moonlight transform into lurking figures. In reality, there may be no danger at all, only the natural sounds and sights of the night. But his mind, primed for survival, constructs a narrative of threat. Similarly, in life, we often create adversaries from shadows, mistaking uncertainty for hostility and unfamiliarity for opposition. These imaginary foes are not limited to external threats often. The most formidable adversaries reside within. Doubt, guilt, fear, and regret are internal forces that, when left unchecked, can take on the appearance of enemies outside ourselves. The man who fights alone may feel as though the world is against him, but in truth he is wrestling with his own unexamined thoughts and emotions. He projects his inner turmoil onto the external world, seeing conflict where there is none, creating battles where peace could exist. Consider how often we mistake disagreement for enmity. A differing opinion can feel like an attack, a challenge to our identity or beliefs. Yet such differences are not inherently hostile. They are natural and even necessary for growth. Still, the man who fights alone may see those who disagree with him as adversaries, failing to recognize that their perspectives are not weapons but mirrors reflecting back his own insecurities or offering opportunities for understanding. Imaginary foes are also born from the stories we inherit. From a young age, we are taught narratives about good and evil, right and wrong, winners and losers. These dualistic frameworks simplify a complex world, but also encourage us to see life in terms of opposition. The man who fights alone often positions himself as the hero of his story, but for there to be a hero, there must also be a villain. And when no villain exists, the mind is quick to fabricate one, whether it is a person, a system, or an abstract idea like failure or inadequacy. These fabricated adversaries serve a psychological purpose. They give the man something to strive against, a sense of purpose in the face of uncertainty. Yet this purpose is inherently hollow, for it is built on illusion rather than reality. To fight imaginary foes is to expend energy in a struggle that cannot be won, because the enemy does not exist outside the mind. Victory in such cases is not achieved through combat, but through understanding and acceptance. The man who fights alone often overlooks a crucial truth: the world is not out to get him. The challenges he faces are not orchestrated by some malevolent force, but are simply part of the human experience. Life is full of obstacles, yes, but these obstacles are not enemies, they are teachers. To see them as adversaries is to miss their lessons, to reduce the richness of experience into a mere struggle for survival. It is also worth noting that imaginary foes thrive on isolation. When we are alone, we are left with our thoughts, which can spiral unchecked into narratives of fear and opposition. Connection, on the other hand, has a remarkable way of dispelling these illusions. A conversation, a shared moment, a glimpse into another's perspective, all these acts have the power to reveal the humanity in those we might otherwise see as threats. The man who fights alone, consumed by his imaginary foes, is caught in a paradox. He fights to protect himself, yet in doing so, he isolates himself further, creating the very loneliness and fear he seeks to escape. To see through these illusions is not to abandon the fight, but to recognize that the real battle lies not with the world, but within the self. It is a battle not of conquest, but of understanding, a journey toward clarity, connection, and peace. The man who fights alone often stands as a symbol of resistance, bracing himself against the currents of life, determined to impose his will on a world that seems chaotic and unyielding. In his eyes, strength lies in defiance, in the refusal to bend or break, in the belief that life is a force to be mastered and subdued. Yet this resistance, though noble in intent, often leads to frustration, exhaustion, and a sense of perpetual struggle. For the world, like water, cannot be conquered. It flows on its own terms, indifferent to the barriers placed in its path. Life, by its very nature, is movement. It is dynamic, ever-changing, and unpredictable. Like a river winding through valleys and over rocks, it carves its path not through force, but through adaptability. The man who resists this flow finds himself in constant opposition, as though trying to swim upstream against an unstoppable current. Every stroke may feel like progress, but the current remains relentless, pulling him back to where he began or sweeping him in directions he never intended to go. Resistance arises from the mind's desire for control. We crave certainty, predictability, and order, seeking to shape the world according to our plans and preferences. Yet the world does not adhere to our desires. It unfolds in its own way, guided by forces far beyond our comprehension. Seasons change, tides rise and fall, and events occur with a rhythm that is both ancient and mysterious. To resist this rhythm is to deny the essence of life itself, to turn away from its natural flow and demand that it conform to our limited understanding. This resistance is often rooted in fear. To let go of control is to face the unknown, to embrace uncertainty, and to acknowledge our vulnerability. The man who fights alone clings to resistance as a shield, believing that if he stands firm enough, he can ward off the chaos of life. Yet in doing so, he only amplifies his struggle. The tighter his grip, the more life slips through his fingers, like trying to hold onto water with a clenched fist. The alternative to resistance is flow. Flow is not passivity or surrender in the sense of giving up. It is a deep alignment with the natural order of things. It is the wisdom of the river that does not fight the rocks in its path, but moves around them, finding the easiest and most harmonious way forward. The river does not resent the obstacles it encounters, nor does it attempt to obliterate them. Instead, it adapts, changes course, and continues on its journey with grace and persistence. Flow requires a profound trust in life, a belief that even when we do not understand the path, it is leading us somewhere meaningful. This trust is not blind faith, but a recognition of life's inherent balance and interconnectedness. Just as the river knows its destination without needing a map, so too does life have its own way of guiding us, even through the challenges and uncertainties we face. The man who fights alone often mistakes flow for weakness. To yield, to adapt, to let go, these seem like acts of defeat. Yet there is great strength in flow, for it requires courage to release the illusion of control and move with life's currents rather than against them. It takes resilience to face the unknown with an open heart and a willing spirit, to embrace change as a constant companion rather than an enemy. Flow also brings clarity. When we resist, our vision becomes narrow, focused solely on the struggle at hand. We see only the obstacle before us, blind to the opportunities and possibilities that lie beyond. But when we flow, we expand our awareness, allowing life to reveal its hidden paths and solutions. A rock in the river may seem like a barrier, but from a wider perspective, it is simply part of the landscape, shaping the water's journey in ways that ultimately lead to greater depth and breadth. The man who learns to flow discovers a new way of being. Instead of fighting the current, he moves with it, using its energy to propel him forward. He recognizes that life is not something to be conquered, but something to be experienced fully in all its unpredictability and wonder. Resistance may feel like strength, but it is flow that truly liberates, allowing us to navigate life's twists and turns with grace and ease. Flow is not about abandoning effort, but about aligning effort with the natural rhythms of life. It is the dance between intention and surrender, between action and acceptance. The man who resists finds himself perpetually at war with life, while the man who flows discovers a profound harmony, a way of living that is both effortless and deeply fulfilling. For to flow is to trust, and to trust is to live. The man who fights alone often feels an acute sense of incompleteness, as though something essential is missing from his life, driving him to seek fulfillment through struggle. He believes that by conquering challenges, acquiring achievements, or proving his worth, he will eventually fill the void he senses within. Yet this feeling of incompleteness is not a reflection of reality, but a misconception, a misunderstanding of the nature of wholeness. Wholeness is not something to be attained or earned, it is inherent, always present, waiting to be recognized. From birth we are whole. Every part of us, our body, mind, emotions, and spirit, is part of an intricate, unified system. But as we grow, society, culture, and experience teach us otherwise. We are told that to be worthy, we must possess certain traits, accomplish certain goals, and fit into predefined molds. This conditioning creates a sense of fragmentation, as though we are pieces of a puzzle that must be completed. The man who fights alone internalizes this belief, viewing life as a quest to gather the missing parts of himself. This pursuit often leads him to look outward. He seeks validation from others, accomplishments that signal success, or possessions that symbolize status. But no matter how much he gains, the feeling of incompleteness remains. This is because true wholeness cannot be found in external sources. It is not something outside of us, but something within, a truth obscured by the layers of expectation, comparison, and self-doubt we accumulate over time. The belief in incompleteness stems from a fundamental misconception about identity. We often define ourselves by what we lack, rather than by what we are. The man who fights alone may focus on his perceived flaws or limitations, seeing them as barriers to his wholeness. Yet these so-called flaws are not imperfections, but integral aspects of his being. Just as shadows are part of light, the parts of ourselves we deem undesirable are part of the greater whole, contributing to the complexity and beauty of who we are. Wholeness is not perfection. It does not mean being without flaws or struggles. Instead, it means embracing every aspect of ourselves, the light and the dark, the strengths and the weaknesses, the triumphs and the failures. The man who fights alone often resists this idea, believing that to be whole he must overcome or eliminate the parts of himself he dislikes. But in truth, these parts are not obstacles to wholeness, they are expressions of it. To reject them is to reject the very essence of what it means to be human. Nature offers countless examples of this truth. Consider the forest, where decay and growth coexist in harmony. Fallen leaves enrich the soil, nurturing new life. The forest is not diminished by its cycles of death and rebirth, it is made whole by them. In the same way, we are not made incomplete by our struggles, fears, or imperfections. These are the fertile ground from which growth arises, integral to the wholeness of our being. The man who fights alone often imagines that wholeness is a destination, something to be reached after enough battles have been won or enough milestones achieved. But wholeness is not a goal, it is a state of being, always accessible in the present moment. It is not something to be earned through effort, but something to be realized through awareness. When we stop striving and simply observe ourselves as we are, we begin to see the completeness that has always been there. This realization requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing life as a series of gaps to be filled, we can begin to see it as a continuous flow of experiences, each one contributing to the richness of who we are. The man who fights alone may see himself as broken, yet every so-called crack is a place where light can enter, illuminating the depth and beauty of his existence. To embrace wholeness is to recognize that nothing is missing, everything we need is already within us. The pursuit of wholeness often distracts us from its presence. The more we seek it, the more elusive it seems, because the act of seeking implies that it is not already here. The man who fights alone exhausts himself in this pursuit, unaware that the very act of fighting creates the illusion of incompleteness. When he stops fighting and turns inward, he discovers that the wholeness he sought was never out of reach. It was simply obscured by his own resistance. Wholeness is a dance of opposites, a balance of contradictions. It is not static but dynamic, constantly evolving yet always complete. The man who fights alone, caught in the illusion of separation, may struggle to see this. But when he lets go of the belief that he must fix, change, or complete himself, he begins to experience the profound truth of his own completeness. This is the nature of wholeness, not something to be attained, but something to be remembered. The man who fights alone often clings to the belief that strength lies in resistance, in standing firm against the tides of life, and in refusing to yield. Surrender, to him, is synonymous with defeat, a sign of weakness and failure. Yet this perspective, while deeply ingrained, overlooks a profound and paradoxical truth: there is immense strength in surrender. Far from being an act of capitulation, surrender is a courageous acknowledgement of reality, a willingness to align with the flow of life rather than futilely opposing it. Surrender requires a deep trust, a trust in oneself, in the natural rhythms of existence, and in the unfolding of events beyond one's control. This trust is not easy to cultivate, for it asks the man to release his grip on the illusion of control. From a young age we are taught to strive, to conquer, and to assert our will upon the world. These lessons encourage us to see surrender as the antithesis of strength, a passive resignation to circumstances. Yet true surrender is anything but passive. It is an active choice to embrace what is, rather than exhausting oneself in resistance to what cannot be changed. Consider the forces of nature. A tree in a storm does not resist the wind it bends, allowing the gusts to pass through its branches. Its flexibility is its strength, enabling it to endure what a rigid structure could not. The ocean's waves flow ceaselessly, rising and falling without resistance, yet their cumulative power shapes cliffs and reshapes coastlines. In nature, strength is found not in defiance, but in harmony, in the ability to move with, rather than against, the forces of life. The man who fights alone often views surrender as an abandonment of his agency, as though letting go means giving up. But surrender does not mean passivity or inaction. It is a conscious decision to release the struggle against what is beyond one's control while focusing energy on what can be influenced. To surrender is to let go of futile battles the ones fought against time, circumstance, or the inevitable, and to redirect strength toward growth, adaptation, and resilience. This act of letting go is not easy. It requires the man to confront his fears, particularly the fear of vulnerability. To surrender is to admit that he does not have all the answers, that he cannot shape every outcome, and that uncertainty is an intrinsic part of existence. This admission can feel like a loss, as though surrendering control means losing a part of oneself. Yet in truth, it is only through surrender that the man can access his deeper strength, the strength that comes from acceptance, humility, and trust in the unfolding of life. Surrender also demands a release of ego. The ego thrives on the illusion of separateness and control, perpetuating the belief that strength comes from domination and resistance. To surrender is to quiet the ego's voice, to step back from its endless demands, and to recognize oneself as part of a greater whole. This recognition is not a diminishment but an expansion, a realization that the man is not alone in his struggles but interconnected with all that surrounds him. There is a profound liberation in surrender. When the man who fights alone finally lets go of his resistance, he discovers a sense of peace that cannot be found through struggle. This peace does not come from external circumstances, but from within a deep and abiding calm that arises from alignment with life's natural flow. It is the peace of knowing that he does not have to fight every battle, solve every problem, or carry every burden alone. The man also discovers new possibilities. Resistance narrows his vision, fixating him on the obstacles before him and blinding him to alternative paths. But when he surrenders, he opens himself to the unexpected, allowing life to reveal opportunities and solutions that he could not see in his state of resistance. Surrender is not an end, it is a beginning, a doorway to transformation and growth. Strength in surrender lies in the willingness to be present with what is without judgment or resistance. It is the courage to face life's challenges with an open heart, to embrace uncertainty with grace, and to trust that even in the midst of difficulty, there is a deeper order at work. The man who fights alone may view surrender as a loss of power. But in truth, it is the ultimate expression of inner strength, a strength that does not rely on force, but on wisdom, resilience, and trust. Surrender is not about abandoning one's dreams or aspirations. Rather, it is about releasing attachment to specific outcomes, recognizing that life often unfolds in ways that are beyond our understanding. The man who learns to surrender does not stop striving, but his striving becomes less about control and more about participation, engaging with life as it is, rather than as he wishes it to be. In this way, surrender becomes a source of empowerment, allowing him to move through life with a sense of freedom, clarity, and inner strength. Life is neither a battle to be won nor a puzzle to be solved, it is a symphony, an intricate dance of interconnected movements, rhythms, and melodies. The man who fights alone often views life as a series of isolated challenges, each demanding his relentless effort to overcome. But in doing so, he misses the deeper truth that life is not a fragmented sequence of struggles, but a harmonious composition where every note, every step, plays a role in the greater whole. To live fully is not to conquer life, but to participate in its flow, to become part of the music, and to find joy in the dance. In a symphony, every instrument has its place. The soft hum of the violin complements the bold crash of the cymbals, while the steady rhythm of the drums anchors the soaring melody of the flute. Each sound is distinct, yet together they create something far greater than the sum of their parts. Life, too, is composed of contrasts, joy and sorrow, light and shadow, stillness and motion. These contrasts are not oppositions to be resolved, but essential elements of the greater composition. The man who fights alone often resists the darker, quieter notes of life, believing they detract from his song. Yet without them, the melody would lack depth and meaning. In dance, every movement flows into the next, creating a seamless narrative expressed through motion. There is no wrong step in a true dance, even a stumble becomes part of the story. The man who fights alone often tries to choreograph every moment of his life, striving for perfection and fearing missteps. But in doing so, he loses the spontaneity, the freedom, and the beauty that come from simply moving with the music of existence. Life, like dance, is not about perfection but presence, not about controlling the rhythm, but feeling it in every fiber of one's being. The symphony and the dance remind us of the importance of interconnectedness. A single instrument, no matter how skillfully played, cannot produce a symphony on its own. A dancer, no matter how graceful, relies on the music, the stage, and the interplay of light and shadow to bring the performance to life. In the same way, the man who fights alone must realize that his strength does not come solely from within, but from his connection to others, to nature, and to the unfolding story of life itself. To isolate oneself is to miss the richness of these connections, to reduce life's symphony to a single solitary note. In a symphony, timing is everything. Each instrument must enter and exit at the right moment, not rushing ahead or lagging behind. This requires trust in the conductor, trust in the other musicians, and trust in the flow of the composition. The man who fights alone often struggles with this trust, feeling the need to control every aspect of his life. He rushes to force outcomes or hesitates out of fear, disrupting the natural rhythm of his existence. Yet life, like music, has its own timing, its own tempo. To align with it is not to surrender passively, but to participate actively, trusting that every moment has its place in the larger scheme. Dance, too, teaches the value of surrender. A dancer does not resist the pull of gravity, but works with it, using it to create movements that are both grounded and transcendent. In the same way, the man who learns to embrace life's gravity, its challenges, its uncertainties, finds that he can move more freely, more gracefully. To resist life's natural pull is to stumble, to work with it is to soar. The man who fights alone often views life's unpredictability as a source of frustration. He struggles to impose order on the chaos, to make the music play according to his script. But the beauty of a symphony lies in its unpredictability, in the way a sudden crescendo can take the listener by surprise, or a soft interlude can evoke unexpected emotion. The beauty of a dance lies in its improvisation, in the way a dancer adapts to the rhythm, the space, and the energy of the moment. Life, too, is most vibrant when we let go of rigid expectations and allow ourselves to be surprised by its twists and turns. The symphony and the dance remind us that life is not about mastery but participation. The man who fights alone may strive for control, believing it will bring him peace. But peace comes not from control but from harmony, from the realization that he is not separate from life's music and motion but an integral part of it. To live fully is to listen deeply to the symphony, to move freely within the dance, and to find joy in the ever-changing rhythms of existence. Life is not a challenge to overcome, it is a masterpiece to be experienced, a dance to be danced with abandon, and a song to be sung with an open heart. The man who fights alone often finds himself exhausted, worn down by the weight of his constant struggle. He believes that peace must be earned through hard work, through relentless effort to overcome obstacles and prove his worth. In his mind, rest is a luxury, something to be indulged in only after achieving a certain level of success or accomplishment. Yet this mindset, rooted in the belief that peace is a distant reward rather than a present possibility, leads him into a cycle of burnout and frustration. True peace is not something that can be won through battle or acquired through effort. It is a state of being, available to us at all times, if we are willing to stop fighting and surrender to the natural rhythms of life. Exhaustion arises when we push ourselves beyond our limits, when we continually give without replenishing our energy. The man who fights alone is often caught in this cycle, believing that only by enduring endless toil will he eventually find rest. But the truth is that peace does not come from the absence of effort, it comes from an understanding of balance. Effort is important, but so is rest. Action is necessary, but so is stillness. The relentless pursuit of goals, while admirable, can drain the spirit if it is not tempered with moments of reflection, self-care, and surrender. Peace does not require us to abandon our desires or goals, it simply asks that we approach them with a different mindset. The man who fights alone tends to view challenges as battles to be won, often becoming consumed by the need to prove himself. In this state, every task becomes an obstacle, every success an endpoint, and every setback a failure. This constant striving creates a tension that wears down the body and mind. Peace, however, arises when we shift from the mindset of struggle to one of flow, allowing our efforts to unfold naturally, without resistance. Rather than forcing our will on the world, we begin to align ourselves with its rhythms, trusting that what we seek will come at the right time, in the right way. The idea that peace must come after exhaustion stems from a deep misunderstanding of what peace truly is. Many believe that peace is an external condition, a place we arrive at only after we've completed all our tasks, conquered all our challenges, or reached a certain level of success. But peace is not a destination, it is a state of mind, one that we can access at any moment by shifting our focus and letting go of the need to control every outcome. The man who fights alone often believes that peace is a reward for hard work, but true peace is not earned, it is experienced when we stop struggling and allow ourselves to rest in the present moment. Rest is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. It is a recognition that we are not machines, that we cannot give endlessly without replenishing ourselves. The man who fights alone often struggles with guilt when he takes time to rest, feeling that he should always be pushing forward, always be striving for more. But in doing so, he ignores the fundamental truth that our energy must be nurtured and restored in order for us to be effective, productive, and creative. Rest is a vital component of peace, just as important as the work we do, for it allows us to recharge and return to our tasks with renewed strength and clarity. To find peace, we must learn to let go of the idea that we must constantly prove our worth through effort. The man who fights alone often believes that his value is determined by his accomplishments, by how much he can achieve or how hard he can work. But this belief traps him in an endless cycle of exhaustion as he seeks validation outside of himself. True peace comes when we realize that our worth is not determined by what we do, but by who we are. It is a quiet knowing that we are enough simply by being, not by doing. This realization does not mean we stop working or striving for our goals, but it shifts the way we approach life. Instead of seeing life as a series of battles to be fought, we begin to see it as a flow of experiences, each one valuable in its own right. Some moments require effort and action, while others require stillness and reflection. Peace is found in the balance between these two energies, between the doing and the being, the action and the rest. When we learn to embrace peace, we find that it does not diminish our drive or ambition, rather, it enhances it. The man who fights alone may fear that by embracing peace, he will become complacent or lose his motivation. But in truth, peace fuels our energy, allowing us to pursue our goals with greater clarity and purpose. It frees us from the anxiety and tension that drain our vitality, enabling us to focus on what truly matters. Peace over exhaustion is not about avoiding effort or challenging moments. It is about cultivating a mindset of acceptance and balance. It is about recognizing that, while hard work is important, it is equally important to rest, to recharge, and to reconnect with the present moment. The man who fights alone often mistakes exhaustion for perseverance, believing that the harder he works, the greater his rewards will be. Yet true rewards come not from the struggle, but from the peace we find in the space between.